Let's get into God's Word. I love today's sermon. We're going to talk about Obadiah. Most people don't read too far into the Old Testament outside of Genesis and Exodus. And when you get to the major prophets, again, the Old Testament, if you're new to the Bible, has a structure to it. You have 5 books of the law: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And then, of course, you have 12 books of history. That's where we get the stories of Esther. You can get into Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther. Then you can get into the 5 books of poetry. That's where we get Job, Psalms, Ecclesiastes. The prophets most people know are what we call the major prophets: Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel. The only reason they're said to be major is because they're just bigger books. We're going through the minor prophets this summer, and the minor prophets are 12: Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Gesundheit. You guys don't read the minor prophets too much because they're just smaller books, and they're hard to get into. Obadiah is the shortest book in the Old. Let me go ahead and give you the slide here of an overview of Obadiah. Shortest book in the Old Testament. It's just one chapter. So if I said Obadiah 10, it's not chapter 10, it's just verse 10, because it's that small of a book. Of course, all we know about Obadiah is his name. We don't have a whole lot of backstory to who he was like we do Daniel. And Obadiah just means servant of the Lord. And it's written after the fall of Jerusalem. And this is really important because when Jerusalem was in exile in Babylon, their city was destroyed, their temple was destroyed. They were taken out of their city to be slaves for the Babylonians. And then after that, Obadiah condemns Edom. Now, the easiest way to speak on Obadiah is Obad Edom. That's Obadiah. Obad Edom. Edom is going to be this theme because in the first part of Obadiah is a judgment on Edom, and then a celebration or restoration of Judah. So that's all Obadiah is going to offer us today. I want to kind of highlight how this is a story about family. And am I my brother's keeper? Now, my brother and I kind of get along. I don't know, we're in our 50s now. Is that weird to say that we're still kind of figuring out with all the things we had to do with our parents and going back and forth? Anybody else have a sibling? I'm looking around, you guys are like, I don't know that I want to talk about my siblings today. This is how true it was of my family. When I was in high school as a sophomore, my brother was a senior, and I was getting picked on by older kids, and I'll never forget, he comes up to me, and he takes their hands off of me, and he pins me to the locker, and he goes, "Nobody messes with my brother but me." And I'm pinned against the locker going, "But who protects me from you, Troy? Who saves me from you? You're the worst one." That's Obadiah. Obadiah is going to be a story about these 2 brothers, and what's happening is a sibling rivalry that over generations become these large groups of people, both Judah and Edom, and how they're still at odds. And Obadiah is writing to address this. So let's go through a little bit of that backstory and explore some sibling rivalry. Okay, so if you see Genesis 25, if you make a note, you want to go back and read through this, you can Google search the history of Judah and Edom or Jacob and Esau. But essentially, it starts with the 2 are twins. They're being born. And the first one that comes out is Esau with red hair. And then grabbing his heel, Jacob means heel grabber. Jacob comes out second. And of course, their mom, who wasn't able to have kids, finally became pregnant, but she had the prayer, and she said, "Lord, please." And the Lord said, "You will have 2 children, and in your womb, these wrestling children. The older will serve the younger." So one of the things Allie asked from the birdhouse, she said, "Why did God bless Jacob when he received the blessing in deceit?" The truth is, there's an inversion, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit, that's going on. You have these 2 brothers who are going to be competitive for attention from their parents. And what God has already instilled is that in ancient times, the firstborn would automatically be given all this extra responsibility, but also the extra privilege. If something happened to Isaac, Esau, for example, by the nature of being the firstborn, minutes before his brother, he would inherit everything. In fact, he would be the one in charge even of his mom or the women and everybody else in the family. And God has this ability to do an inversion where he says, you know what? Your social structure doesn't concern me. The older will serve the younger. You know how prevalent this is in Scripture? When Saul was decided to no longer be king, Samuel went to a family, said, Jesse, are these all your sons? He said, yes. He went from oldest to youngest. None of them were approved. Until finally he says, do you have any more? And the youngest of all the brothers, they didn't even think would be part of the blessing, was out still in the field. Go get him. David was the one anointed to be king, the youngest. It's God's way of saying, you have a class order and I don't follow that. So Rachel already knew this. Likely Esau already knew this. And so you get to Genesis chapter 27 and 28, where Jacob fulfills this blessing deceitfully. And you can look at it and say, well, Jacob wasn't a great guy either. Did you catch the Bible doesn't have great people fulfilling God's plan? Abraham tried to sell his wife Sarah. What are you talking about? Moses kept pushing back on God about going to Pharaoh, making excuses why he couldn't go and honor God. Of course, the great stories in the Bible are complicated people. So Jacob, of course, steals Esau's birthright. These brothers are having a hard time getting along. And then, of course, Jacob finally has to be confronted by Esau, and he apologizes. Now, another part of the story is that Esau forgives Jacob, but it seems to be fleeting. It's only in this moment, because then we follow up and we get to Act 2. So we have these two brothers. They don't get along. They kind of get along. They kind of make up, and we get this great forgiveness story. But then we go farther into the future, and we get Edom. Edom is the nation that is the ancestry of Esau. Centuries pass. They become the Edomites. They become a nation that's neighboring Israel. When Babylon comes in and destroys Jerusalem, Edom just watches. Now, they watch from the perch. They're in the mountains, and they're safe. Essentially, they live a hard life, but they don't have to have the threat of Babylon. Israel was uniquely placed on the Mediterranean, and so they were the ones that everybody came in. Assyria, now Babylon. They want to take over the nation of Israel. But Edom's sort of up in the mountains, forgotten. But remember, they're the brothers and sisters, they're the family of Judah. So Obadiah says, after the destruction of Jerusalem, I'm just going to read a few verses. I'm going to read Obadiah 10 through 15. Because of the violence against your brother Jacob, you'll be covered with shame. You will be destroyed forever. On that day, you stood aloof with strangers carrying off their wealth. The foreigners entered the gates and they cast lots for Jerusalem. You were like one of them. You should not gloat over your brother in the day of his misfortune, nor rejoice with the people of Judah in the day of their destruction. Don't march against the gates of the people while they're suffering this disaster. Don't gloat over them. You should not wait at the crossroads to cut down the fugitives, to hand over the survivors in the day of their trouble. In other words, they're saying, Edom's like, hey, you missed one. Go take them too. Don't forget about the others. This is the betrayal of family. Now, that doesn't always have to be the case. Most of us look at the world we live in and we say, we suffer the history of the people before us, and we can't figure out how to reconcile. Does anybody feel that in our social construct today? All the political news you get into, and you're like, I'm in this camp, I'm in this camp. And the things from 50 years ago or 100 years ago are still bubbling up, and we still have a society that's got to fix the past from 500 years ago. But the truth is, there's actually an ability for nations to figure it out, to forgive. If you want the most obvious one, do some history after World War II. How is Germany in the position it's in today, when it started not only one but two world wars? How is it a neighbor to France. How are they ever getting along? Probably one of the ones that's most striking, if you do any research on Rwanda, the Hutus and the Tutsis, they were actually divided basically not by race, but just by their disposition. Those that were taller, those that were shorter, those who had skinnier noses, those who had flat noses. That was by those who colonized them. But eventually, they had this infighting, the War of 1994, and 800,000 Tutsis were murdered in 100 days. But now that country has struggled to get through that difference, coming back together, reintegrating the communities. It's not perfect. It still has its pains, but they're reconciling. What God is saying to Edom is to say, you've never wanted that reconciliation. Other than that brief moment Esau and Jacob made peace with each other, you've been two different nations. Can I give you another little sneak preview? If you want to really get into this, you can read in Matthew chapter 2 of an Edomite who decreed the death of Jewish boys from 0 to 2 years old because the Magi told him that the Messiah was to be born. They wanted to come worship the Messiah. And who was that Edomite? Herod the Great. Let's get to Act 3. We're talking about the inversion of family. This is a transactional love. How does Obadiah speak to us today? I want to challenge that many of us today think that our help of other people is transactional. We'll make a post about something that we agree with against something we disagree with. We'll make an online donation. We'll march for strangers. These are people we encounter through a screen or a headline or an algorithm. But if we can't do that for the people closest to us, what does any of the others matter? Who are the people in your life that go unsupported? The strain that you have. If you created it, do you, like Jacob, go running to Esau to say, can you please, what must I do? How can we get past this? We've outsourced our compassion to volunteering occasionally, but we fail the people closest to us daily. I kind of tease this about my wife. She will drop everything to help every one of you. Again, is she here? Is she in here? Yes. When I tell the stories about my wife, if she's here, I've got to be very gentle. If she's not in here, I can be very honest. That's not true. The truth is, she would say the same thing if she was here. We are very transparent people. In fact, it terrifies some of you how transparent we are. But my joke, she will read sometimes when she is going so far for the kids, for the grandkids, for the community, and then I'm pouting when she gets home. And I go, what about me? I actually don't say that. I do things like this. There's nothing to eat. We have nothing in the fridge. I can't even find a place to sit in our house. There's piles everywhere. Takes a little bit. We get a little catty with each other, and then all of a sudden she's like, oh, you don't feel like I'm giving you any attention. Like, yeah, you're not. And then we have date night. Our date night consists of Taco Bell and Walmart. How about you guys? That's the best date night ever. I love that she is willing to drop everything to help everyone. And the truth is, the light shines brightest at home. Often, we're transactional in our kindness towards people because we can compartmentalize. We can say, I'll help you, but then I can be incredibly selfish about my life outside of that scope. When in reality, and I challenge young people about this all the time, and parents, you've heard me say this 1,000 times, if your kids don't have chores and you don't hold them accountable to those chores, you're missing an opportunity because that is for the communal good. And you have to ask the question, why are our kids behaving so selfishly, which is, what's in it for me? I went to I went to Greenville's Panther Academy, and I talked about chores. And I asked a simple question: how many of you do laundry? How many of you do the dishes and you alternate and who does what? Or you take the dishes and put them in the dishwasher, you take them out. I laughed when I was a kid and people would ask my mom, they're like, do you guys have a dishwasher? That was the new thing. And my mom would say, yes, we have 3. Of course she had dishwashers. That was our job. That was our chore. I shared the story about a teenage girl who was sitting on her couch, and I'm talking to her mom, and the teenage girl went to reach for the water that she had put on the carpet, and she spilled it, not paying attention because the other hand has the phone in her face, and beyond her is the TV show that she's watching. So we got all kinds of activity going on, and she spills the water. She goes, Mom, I spilled my water. The mom leaves our conversation, goes and cleans it up, gets the towel out of the kitchen, cleans it up, leaves. She goes back to put the towel away. Without getting to the kitchen, the daughter says again, Mom, I need more water. Right? The mom goes and gets the cup and fills the water. I'm like, I don't think I would have filled that water. Well, actually, I probably would have, but it had been all over that girl. Now, why? That mom wants to raise those kids and say, do good in society. But if you can't manage the household, the light shines brighter at home, then you're putting on a front. You're telling other people what matters, but you're not taking care of it where it develops best. That's what Edom is being challenged by. They didn't fail a stranger, they failed family. God's indictment is very specific. You know, Judah, you know this wasn't fair. You had every reason to show up, but you didn't. Why? I can tell you in part why. Because family is messy. It doesn't go away. If you volunteer for an hour at Nokomis Christian Missions and somebody rubs you the wrong way, you don't have to show up the next month, but you have to go back home. You have to be with the people that are the ones that are supposed to be unconditional love. Let me share with you how we are called to be family. I'm going to give you a couple of takeaways that you probably relate to the best. Did I have that fourth one there? Let us do good to everyone, especially to those who are of the household of faith. We are called to be family. Jesus doesn't love humanity in the abstract. He enters a specific place, a specific people, a specific moment, and he creates the church. And he wants the church to do the same. And he doesn't want the church to be a fan base for Jesus. He doesn't want the church to be a political identity for Jesus. He doesn't want the church to be a membership club for Jesus. He wants us to be family. And I know that family is messy. Family is frustrating. But family is where it begins to be unconditional. And by the way, if the church can model what it means to be the family, then you have an example for when you go home and model it as within your family. Let's do good to everyone, especially those who are part of the household of faith. You don't turn a blind eye to your own backyard. And I have to say, this is a difficult sermon for me personally. Our family wasn't very close. You know the stories. I've shared them. I loved my parents, still love my parents. I celebrate that they're with Jesus. But we weren't close. My sister's reunion with my parents has to have been something very special. But we were strained as kids. Forgotten birthdays. But we had to be dressed and ready for church on time. Anybody else raised in that kind of church family? We were there Sunday morning, every time doors were open. But at home, a lot of fighting, a lot of rebellion, a lot of distancing. I went to my grandmother's funeral, and my dad, being the pastor, sort of just a lot to take in. He did a phenomenal job for her eulogy as the pastor. You kind of wondered how a son would do that. Of course, I was challenged to do that for my parents as well. But I heard a lot of stories about my grandmother. And they went something like this. She was great with her neighbors. She was great in her community. She was great in her church. What my dad didn't share a lot about was his mom. And then it dawned on me. He just knew how to raise us the way he was raised. Now, I know I've spoken fun of my wife. You all know she's the reason we're really good at family. If it was left up to me, I'd probably be a lot like my dad. Kids are always like, you're a better boss than a father. You relate to us. I did. I always said my angle was coaching or business or the element of activities. And she is the one that is sort of that emotional glue, that connection. So when my dad gave the sermon, I remember also saying, you know what? That's probably why you're my family. Jesus said, who is my brother? Who is my mother? Those who gather together in his name. We're family. Now the good news is, you may have a dysfunctional family. Maybe your family puts the fun in dysfunctional. I got a list of them here that would be fun to consider. If your family is the grudge keeper family, somebody's still mad about something. Nobody quite remembers why, but you still can't talk to each other about it. Does anybody live in the elephant in the room family? Everyone sees the problem, but nobody will talk about it. Nobody will name it, and the elephant just keeps getting bigger. Maybe you're part of the scoreboard family. Every conflict ends up with someone reciting a list of every wrongs the other person made. That's why I'm better than you, because you've made more mistakes. Some of you might be a part of an enmeshed family. You're so close that nobody can have an honest conversation without the whole system collapsing. Anybody here part of the ghosting family? Conflict resolution is just you just stop talking to each other for a year or so. The performative family. You put everything online, your family looks great. Christmas, holidays, but in private, you're falling apart. What Obadiah says to Edom is an invitation to all of us. If we can consider what it means to be a family, we see how Jesus created family with his disciples. We can have a better life than just outsourcing our kindness 1 or 2 hours when it seems fitting. We should be the example that the world looks to say, what is a loving family look like? Well, it looks like a messy family, but it looks like an unconditional, loving